Thank you. It's good to have each of you just to spend a few moments after the worship service. We had a wonderful worship service kicking off National Week of Prayer. And I thought since I have such wonderful, intelligent, professional scholars, experts in the area, to spend just a few moments just to have a discussion as we enter into this period of Week of Prayer. And so if you would just start by just giving your name and about your involvement in work with HIV and AIDS. So we'll start right here.
My name is Nancy Kingwood, and I've been, this year marks the 26th year that I've worked in the field of HIV and AIDS, and this is my 22nd year of doing the Week of Prayer for the healing of AIDS.
My name is Jean Brown, and I am also a health educator and lead facilitator for women's group at GBAPP. I have been doing this work for the last 12 years, and I've seen the impact that HIV/AIDS has done on our community.
My name's Bernice DeRosa, and I'm the nurse practitioner at Stanford Health. I work for the Ryan White Clinic, which is primarily HIV positive, underserved communities in the lower Fairfield County.
Hello there. I'm Tom Butcher. I am the program administrator for what's called the Ryan White program. I manage a federal grant that provides care to people with HIV and AIDS in New Haven and Fairfield County. This is my 33rd year of doing HIV work. I'm that old.
I guess last but not least, I'm Cartisha Hall. I'm a Ryan White Part A medical case manager, and I work with people who have a diagnosis of HIV or AIDS. I've been with GBAPP for almost 6 years now, and I have a nonprofit called Bucks for Blood. We advocate, educate, and raise awareness of HIV/AIDS in the community.
Okay, thank you so much. I have a few questions, and I would just throw them out. And also want to ask Reverend Kingwood to lead part of this discussion, and where she feels to proceed. But I've been around for a while, as many of you, celebrated 40 years in ministry this year. It's a long time, so I started before I was born. Like before I created you in your mother's womb, I knew you. So it's been a wonderful time. So I've seen somewhat of a transition, the way the religious community has responded to HIV and AIDS. I remember when it first came out, funeral homes would not do funerals. Churches would not open their doors. And I like to tell people then AIDS came to church. And we discovered that we need to change our philosophy. So what have you seen, just anyone can jump in however you feel, what have you seen over the years as sort of a positive way that has happened in the life of the church, but also in a negative way, something that we might do to correct some of the damage that we have done?
Well, for me, I think since this is my 22nd year doing the Week of Prayer for the healing of AIDS, which is a national program of the Balm in Gilead. We know early in the 80s, churches were silent, specifically black churches. Until around 87, 88, and then some of the churches started to engage and mobilize and start because they were doing funerals. And we know that around 1985 was a crack epidemic when there were babies being born that were HIV positive. And the churches, again, in some parts of the country, some were engaged and some were not. And then as Panessa Seal, the executive director of the Balm in Gilead, continued to do her work throughout the country, and also Dr. Edwin Sanders out of Nashville, Tennessee, they were the forerunners. And then early 90s, a lot of churches started mobilizing, engaging, having services, candlelight services, educational forums, and then we went silent again. I think we've gotten complacent, and I think the harm that we as the body of Christ, as believers, might have done, and not your church or my church, but just throughout the church community. See, if we talk about HIV, now we got to talk about sex. And I don't think we do that well. And I think that, as we talked a little bit about in the worship service, I think sometimes we get stuck with theology. But, again, I think sometimes it can cause more harm than good.
And you mentioned now that we have to talk about sex. I believe someone saw it on Facebook that said coronavirus is out. Now everyone is trying to get a face mask. But yet AIDS is out. No one is trying to distribute condoms.
No. We have a list.
Yeah.
What churches we can and cannot.
Okay.
Distribute condoms.
Yeah. Yeah. Some churches continue to have that wall that we can't enter in and talk about sex or HIV. Because if we talk about HIV, like Reverend Nancy said, we got to talk about sex. And they still have that wall. They make sure they let us know what we can do and what we cannot do. And I often hear people say, well, you know, you're going to talk about this, and, you know, I have to guide you into what you can say. And I think that hinders us from doing the full work that we have to do, especially in the churches.
I agree with that, especially like with my background with Haitian churches and Haitian community and Caribbean period. You know, churches oftentimes speak to abstinence and everything, and just having that stigma and just lack of awareness and opening up to all the different possibilities of how someone could get HIV and just only focusing on sex and trying to not have the discussion because they're so sex focused instead of realizing, you know, it could be through people are born with HIV, IV drug usage, like there's numerous ways married women get HIV. So like just debunking that stigma and just being able to open up and having like healthy sexual history, sexual discussions, and just being real and understand the realities while also implementing the word. I think that's like important for sure.
For me, what I've seen, and I mentioned this to you before, about often the Bible had been used to really beat people, especially queer people, gay people. And so what we're seeing now is concentration of HIV in our black community, and especially with our black women and young gay men. And so the stigma of being black and gay in church is a real thing. And so where I would love to see the church open and embrace and be affirming, they're not so easy to find. And so I do think that there is a role for the church, but I do think it's got to involve more church education of members about HIV, about sexuality, inclusiveness, about stigma. And I think if church leaders work together to educate each other, you could see an opening, a place for us to be in church, because we want to be in church. I'm telling you, as a gay person, I love church. And it was a long time coming. So, and the church has always been there. And God has always been there. More importantly, God has always been there. The church wasn't. So,
Wow, that's deep.
Wow.
Yes, yes. That's deep.
It's not necessarily more so the church. Sometimes I find programs associated with the church, like some of the halfway houses per se. I don't know, Reverend Nancy could remember a time we did a group at one of the houses where women just got out of jail, and I said something about sex, not even sex with someone else, but sex with yourself. They escorted us out of there, and Nancy called me.
all right now.
Yeah, that's communicated.
And Nancy called me and was like, what did you say? But it all starts with educating ourselves and knowing where you at and knowing who you talking to. Because you can give a message, but if people perceive your message the wrong way, they're not going to learn anything.
And can I also just add that churches that we've been trying to get into to have services and education like this, it's okay for us to, because we're outreach specialists, it's okay for us to go in the parking lot and do a table and talk about HIV outside. But for us to be inside, it's a challenge for us to get inside the church to talk about it to the congregation. But it's okay for us to be on the outside.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And let me just mention, also to get your feedback, because we mentioned that the high rates among African-American
Yes.
gay men.
Mhm.
And I want to say this correctly so I don't get as much hate mail. Because I believe the black church has been a wonderful institution. But I believe one issue that the black church has been hypocritical on is the gay community.
Absolutely.
Because I've been in church very active for 40 years. And I've never known a moment in time when there were not persons whose sexuality that was just diverse. Everyone did not have the same sexuality.
Right.
And so we just ignored it and didn't talk about it. But we had gay brothers and sisters, LGBTQ community, always part of the church. How do you believe now that the church can reach out in love and embrace persons that we have been hypocritical with?
I think that's a great question, because how do we do that? And how do we do that with the love of Christ? And from my experience,
It has to start with the leadership. And we have had closed door sessions with just senior pastors to talk and speak about their own biases or their theologies or what they believe
about people, number one, either living with HIV or people, as they say, with alternative lifestyles. And that terminology is a kind of like a turnoff, right? Because it's not an alternative life. It's alternative from you.
Alternative.
It's not alternative to them.
Right.
But again, it's also
like that.
figuring out the
language.
Right.
You know, what do we say and how do we engage? But again, it has to start with the leadership, because the leadership sets the tone of the church.
Right.
And the leadership and the mission and the vision will drive the church. I've worked with churches across the country, and the first thing I do is either go to their website and I look at their mission and vision statement. Are you really living that out?
Right.
And if so, how are you doing that in tangible ways in the community, inside, internally, but also outside in the community? How do you do that? And so if we're going to engage, if we're going to go all in, I think it starts again with the senior pastor putting language to that in his or her own way. Yeah.
I agree. We do talk about it, but it's just not talk about from the pulpit, right? And so it's not addressed. You'll hear, chatter about somebody who's same gender loving person, and but they can't hold offices, and there's nothing you can do but be a member.
Some of those pastors were saying gender-loving persons, they just hid it.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's right.
Talk
That's
about
right.
it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. Call a thing a thing.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, call a thing a thing. I like that. Yeah.
And so it just we don't show that compassion for that person to say we're trying to save a soul. And when we go out there, we always say when we're on and doing outreach, if we can't save a soul, we're going to save a life. And so we work that in, because whoever you are, God loves you. And like you said, whatever we're in may change, but God just never change. And we never know what God will do in that. So we bring ministry to that as well, when we reach out to people who are living that same gender-loving lifestyle.
I'll tell you, as a gay, so it's an interesting animal I am. I'm a white, gay parishioner in a historically black church.
Yeah, that's
So like, And I will tell you, I have found more love in that place than I've ever felt in any white church. And the pastor, when the pastor includes me and calls me and includes me in a sermon in front of a congregation, I cry. I cry because I've been out there. I was out there for so long. So naming us, claiming us, saying, I see you, because there's so many of us that are in the pews, and you know who we are, but you look beyond us, or we're invisible because you don't know how to address us and include us and say who we are and that we are loved. So this is a beautiful place for me to be. So I tell white folks in white churches, that the open and affirming is wonderful to see in a Presbyterian church, you know, a white Presbyterian, or a, but there's no skin in the game. I said, you know, so if you're a black preacher, a black pastor in a black congregation, and you are mentioning us, you got skin in the game because there's risk.
Right.
You as a black pastor, you can understand that.
Yes.
Because your conservative members and the deacon board can turn. So it's even more poignant to me to be in that black setting and to hear me called, you know, and acknowledged and loved. But I'm a white guy, and I've got white privilege. So I can come into that space perhaps a little bit differently than a black member of my church. So it's also being mindful of being in that space.
I agree with what everyone said, but I think a key point is accountability. I think that would go a long way, even just like as a Christian clinician, a female. A lot of times, you know, when I meet, like, let's say a gay patient, I would address it as, you know, I don't always know every single thing with what goes on with your life. Just like, you know, I don't always know what's going on in the lives of black women. Every black woman, I'm one person, but this is a chance where we could engage with each other. I'm able to recognize my shortcomings. I'm able, if I, you know, use the wrong gender, correct me. So I think that if, you know, leaders in the church could take that like accountability and say, hey, you know, I've recognized in the past where we've fallen short in how we've done things, but we're willing to, you know, make these changes. These are the efforts. And in the same breath, you know, the members who experience like key terms like church hurt in the past, just offer a little bit of grace and understand that, like, yes, this has been historically what's been going on, but in order to move forward, in order to end this epidemic, we have to work together. And part of that comes with forgiveness, coming together, having healthy dialogue, and understanding what went wrong, how can we move forward, what are your needs, what are our needs, and how can we move forward together. But that takes accountability on both parts and grace and willingness on both parties.
Reverend Kingwood, we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you, however you want to generate the rest of this conversation, so questions you may have of the panel. So I want to turn it over to you.
So we have HIV experts here.
And so we know we're 38 years into the epidemic. Where have we made strides?
And what work do we need to do? We still need to do. And I think we've made great strides in the medical field. So this is just me, the medical field, and the advancement of medications and early testing and early detection. Now we have a 60-second test that somebody can get a preliminary positive or a negative in 60 seconds. That's unheard of, right? Because it always has not been like that. No. When I started testing, we had to take a full tube of blood, send it to the lab, and it would take 2 weeks for the test results to come back if the state lab wasn't backed up, right? So during those 2 weeks, imagine what somebody goes through. So, and if you look at it through that lens, what areas do you all think that we've made strides? But I know even in 2020, we still have a lot of work to do.
Just even having the conversation. Like, I'm fairly new and younger. So just even growing up, this conversation would never have been had. So I think that's remarkable and speaks to the awareness of everything, because I think that's the biggest barrier. It's risk perception, awareness, stigma. I think those are the biggest barriers. No matter how advanced medication is, if you're disconnected from your community and these conversations aren't being had, then it doesn't matter how advanced medication is if you can't reach the people who need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tom?
I was looking at her. So I think seeing one pill a day.
Yes.
So there are a couple of strides for me. I don't think there's going to be a cure, and I tell people I don't believe that. But there's a functional cure. So we have two different sides of an equation now. We have someone HIV positive adherent to one pill a day.
Yes.
Can bring the viral load down to an undetectable level so it can't be transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great public health. The other side is a medication, and I take this medication to keep me HIV negative. So I am HIV negative, and so if I can't get HIV, and someone who is adherent on medication can't spread HIV, that's where we're seeing the numbers go down. I think where we can probably agree is that, and I think especially as white people in the world, we think we'll give you a pill, black people, and you'll
Right.
take the pill and you'll be fine,
Right.
right?
Right.
Without understanding, historical trauma, without understanding stigma, without understanding before you take the pill, you have to understand Tuskegee and
Yeah.
Right,
sterilization.
absolutely.
And so we as white people generally, I'm generalizing, think, oh, why don't they do this? Why don't they take the pill? And why don't white people understand historically what we have done to our black brothers and sisters? So now it's like, oh, I don't know why they won't do it. So there's the barrier for me, is I don't think that enough of us have that awareness about our black and brown brothers and sisters
Right.
in terms of prevention and care. And that's for me, it hurts my heart. It just does.
And Cartesia, I'm gonna have you jump in, as a case manager, to talk about what you see. But before that, I wanna just, pick up where Tom left off, that we don't really look at historical trauma and the impact that it has on health equity. Just because somebody says, just because you have a card,
And that doesn't always mean access. It doesn't always mean access, and it always doesn't mean the right access.
That's right.
And some of us may have medical insurance, but we don't trust the medical institutions, nor do we trust what the
Right.
doctors say.
That's true.
And so to have an advocate between
the doctors, the physicians, as well as the patient, the person living with HIV, I think is crucial, and that's where case managers come in.
Absolutely.
Because they are the ones that ensure that people not only get in care, but stay in care. And so I'm gonna open up to you, Cartesia.
Well, it seems that some of the people that I work with, like the older ones, they they were more vested into the HIV fight. They were the ones that was coming out. They were the ones that were rallying. But like you guys said, people have got complacent. People aren't willing to do the things that they did back in the days to get bills passed. Like traditionally, it was a gay white man's disease.
Right.
So you had the whole community coming out, going to the Capitol, storming for stuff. But now, people are kind of entitled. And I think that sets us back, because we have to be an advocate of our own health. We have to kind of know where we stand. And it's good to have a medical case manager, but I could give you referrals. I could tell you to go this place and that place, but if you really don't want it, then it's not gonna happen. It's like Bernice said, you have to be willing to get into the fight. And that's the change I see. I see that later years, people were more willing to be invested in their own health care. But people are more complacent now because they feel they could just take this one pill, but they don't know the depths of taking this one pill.
I think it's also when we try to create a system of care.
Care, when we really look at it from a helicopter kind of perspective. Like, we know, and Tom and I talk about this all the time, the HIV system of care is antiquated, it is broken.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And we need to have and hire people that mirror this epidemic.
Absolutely.
We need to ensure that the
People that are working in this field are equipped to work,
Yeah.
that they continually go through continuing education, because this epidemic, it also morphs, it's different, right? And so we need to keep up with the technology, we need to keep up with the medical strides, but we also need to be so embedded in our community that
I can pick up the phone and call another organization and say, hey, I got somebody in trouble. Now, if we were to flip that in the reverse, What if someone from the church can have that type of
Yes,
communication
absolutely.
and relationship
Yes.
with people that work in the field? Say, yo, I have someone in my congregation, they really need your help. We're there.
Right.
And that's how we create a system of care where no one is really left behind. No one is really left out. And if they do fall out of care, that we created this network that somebody's going to pick it up. Right?
Yeah.
So if you don't show up
At church for 6 months,
Right.
you don't show up to your medical appointment at 6 months, we're going to know.
Right.
Because we are such a caring and a caring community, and we've created these environments where people can show up in the world however they show up in the world in a non-judgmental space, but know that somebody's fighting for them
and know that somebody cares for them.
You know, Nancy, I'm thinking about church, right? We're talking a lot about church, but I've been given grace. I've been given grace to be in black spaces that are sacred, and it's not always church. So church is one black sacred place where you can be beautifully black without apology or without, the minute you step out that door, everything changes.
Yeah.
I'm going to be speaking, I told Nancy this, I'm going to be speaking at a black barber shop. And I go to a black barber.
Okay.
Right? But it's not mine. They didn't invite me, you know. There's some passage about they don't, Jerusalem doesn't greet the prophets very well. So in my own. But I will be going to a sacred black space, which is the barber shop. And so if they don't show up to see Cartisha
Right.
or to Nancy's agency or to church, they still could be going to a community of like-minded folks. And so even a salon, a beauty salon, could
be
be
there.
church.
Right.
And so I think that we need to also expand and look at those other places that are secular but sacred.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's where I want to move in those spaces, in the black sacred spaces that are very, very special, but aren't in this kind of a center.
And that's how we get to zero.
Yes,
Yes.
That's how we get to zero.
And I think you're right, because as we have discussed, we're entering into those spaces. And so, because women are there, I facilitate groups with women, HIV, heterosexual black women, right? And so the groups that facilitate, women would come in not knowing what to expect. And so they come, oh, it's about HIV. It is about HIV, but when we educate you, afterwards we're done. Now we had a group on Saturday, and now we have women are so interested because they did not know about HIV and its effects and behaviors. Now women want to do a testing party because they have learned so much.
I like that testing part.
Yeah, so, it has bring education, and like Brittany said, awareness, and we're educated, we're in the community, and we are talking about HIV. And so women who would never always come to these groups, they would come in and they listen, and then they start, because there are activities that they can participate in, and then they would share. It's a sacred space, and we let them know that. It's a sacred space. You don't have to, but we encourage you to. And so we get into their children's lives. Now they start to tell us about their children who are having sex, and they are not comfortable talking to them about sex.
As we wrap up in our last few minutes, what are some final thoughts that you would like to leave the audience that will view this?
I think to keep having these conversations and to enter spaces that we ordinarily wouldn't. Like Tom said, like I was thinking about we could do like a wine down Wednesday, like we go to a bar, we have HIV testing in the back, and just get together, because it's the places and the people that you don't think that's listening, but they listening.
I say, like, as clinicians, I definitely say we need to come outside of our normal habitat and our desk and our clinics and reach the people where they're at. We say that all the time, like meeting our patients where they're at, and we're not really doing that. And I know it's time consuming. I have like all the notes and all the, it's busy. But I think in order to end the epidemic or even get some semblance of that, we need to find a new innovative approach, and that's not in the clinics, because they're not coming to the clinics.
So when we bring the clinic to church.
Exactly.
Yes.
So-
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
And try a new approach, and that could be part of our community service engagement or whatever have you. We need to, medicine's different now. But, doctors used to meet patients at home, providers used to meet patients at home, and I think we have to implement that some way, meeting people where they're at.
Literally.
Not expecting them to come to us.
Tom, a final statement?
I think intergenerational and interracial conversations are vital. So
The teacher said old people, so I guess.
yeah, well, I'm old.
Yeah, I know, right? Did you feel
know,
that too? I felt that.
So this old man
Yeah.
was once 22 and gay and came out from rural Pennsylvania here in Connecticut because I could. But I think having the dialogue, the intergenerational stuff is vital. And it's not just old people talking to young people, because I learned so much from my millennials, and I asked them about what is your life like now? What is happening in your world? And tell me so I don't think we have conversations intergenerationally that's happens or respectful or differences. So for me, I love the dialogue with others that are not me to learn more about me.
Thank you, Jean.
I just agree that the dialogue has to continue. We got to go to places that that we can reach the people that we need to talk to, and bring them in to us. I agree. We can't stay, like we said, we're going to have innovative ways in which we're going to be in the community. 9 to 5 is not going to work for us. We got to go beyond the hours that we work, and we got to make sure that we make spaces for those that we're trying to reach.
I think one final thought for me before we turn it back over to Dr. Stallworth is, I need you to survive.
Oh,
That we need each other.
absolutely.
Whether
Absolutely.
we are HIV positive or not, that it does take a community and a village to get to zero.
It does.
That where no one is left out. We need each other, and not just in the fight against AIDS, but we need each other in life.
We do. Wow.
Thank you to each of you, and let's keep the
Conversation going. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.